Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Middle Class Rockstar. I'm your host, Andy Sito. This is episode number 131, I think, 132, 130 something. I've been doing this since 2018. It was every other weekly at first, and then it became weekly for quite some time. And then the last couple of years, it's been kind of just as I feel like it. And I think I've addressed this recently. I would like to get back to doing this regularly again. When my wife and I moved to Nashville about a year and a half ago, there was a lot going on. It was an adjustment to the move and finding new places to gig and tour to in a new part of the country. So anyway, trying to get back to something more regular. But the other thing about it is editing these podcasts can take quite a bit of time. Not only do you prepare for the interview, and you kind of have to rely on the other person having strong internet connection too if you're not doing it in person. I record these, I used to record these on Zoom, but record my audio separately on Logic or Pro Tools, sync the two together, then put it into Final Cut and create smaller clips for content, and then generate captions in another app and then post them. And it just takes hours and hours. Well, I started using Riverside FM. I've been using it for just these last couple podcasts, and it works great because it does all that for you. They're not sponsoring this podcast, by the way, but it does all that for you. It puts up the captions on the video, and you can easily create small vertical clips, and AI will even suggest clips, and you can make little edits from there. So I'm hoping that this makes things a lot easier. However, the audio quality that I'm getting within the app is not quite where I'd like it to be, and you'll notice that in the interview. I'm usually using, my nice speaking microphone, my SM7B. Well, the audio on this podcast is just what I'm getting from my Bluetooth headphones, which is not ideal. So I'm working that out. There's a couple solutions, but it's a bit of a transition. So thanks for bearing with me on that. What else before we jump into the interview? It's officially baseball season. I'm a big baseball fan, a Cincinnati Reds fan in particular, and they had their first spring training game just this past Saturday. Ellie De La Cruz hit a home run from the left and the right side of the plate in his only 2 at-bats of the day. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, let's jump in to the interview. I'm speaking today with Austin Ash Lemon. We both graduated from CU Denver, and we're in the music program, but we didn't know each other. I think I left right before he got there or something. Anyway, he started a record label, an online indie record label called Needlejuice Records. It's very niche or niche, however you want to say that word. They find records that they want to put out on vinyl, and they put them out on vinyl, and they have developed a loyal fan base and are making a living from putting out these records on vinyl. They've developed a loyal fan base of people who love the records that they are putting out. They've got a certain community, and they give something to the community, and the community responds. So we chat about some of the challenges of running a record label, the evolution of how it came about, funding and pressing, and it's really interesting, especially because in 2025, when you hear people say record label, what is that? There's so many different definitions for a record label now, and they focus on putting things out on vinyl. That is what they do. So it's one type of record label, and Austin has been running it for several years now and having success with it. So I'm looking forward to chatting with him about that, or you all hearing our conversation. Also, Austin just put a record out called, under the artist's name, the Odd Ditties. It's called Backstage, and I would say it is Odd Ditties. It's a great record, and there's indie and punk and rock and roll and traditional jazz and a whole bunch of different things. We throw the word eclectic around a little too liberally, in my opinion, when describing music, but this is eclectic. It truly is. So we're going to chat about that as well. Without further ado, I've been rambling too much today. I'm sorry. Here's my conversation with Austin Ash Lemon of the Odd Ditties and Needlejuice Records. Okay, middle class rock star. I'm here with Austin Ash Lemon, and you said for all intents and intensive purposes that's how it's pronounced. What's the story behind that?
Well, my legal name is Austin Ashleman. It's a long, gangly German name that no one quite ever pronounced correctly, so I decided to go phonetically, chop it in half, and say Ash Lemon, and that seems to have worked out much better.
I like it. Well, and also if you decided that you wanted to start an overpriced clothing company, I feel like Ash Lemon would work well for that.
Yes, sure. I don't foresee that occurring, but I'm glad that I have that option.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of just became familiar with you recently when you reached out, and I looked into you more because of the Colorado connection, which is where I'm from. I'm in Nashville now, but from Colorado. Are you in the Front Range area?
I live in Longmont.
Wonderful. And how long have you been there?
Since I was like six. I was born in South Dakota, but my mom took me down here when I was six, and I've been here ever since. So it feels like I don't have a lot of like emotional connection to South Dakota. This feels like my place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, gosh, I don't know how we haven't come across each other yet.
I've
But
been I've,
it
I've been
feels.
out of the scene for I mean, I've been working on this record we're here to talk about for 8 years, and I have been kind of dormant in that time period. And I had a band called Smashy Claw back in the day. Um, and even then it was only like a smattering of shows I played in Denver. So I mean, it's not super surprising to me that we might not have come across each other. But I mean, I uh, reached out because I was looking for local places to promote this record, and I saw that you had some of my friends on the show, like let's see, and friends and some of my teachers from when I went to CU Denver, like
Oh,
uh,
Greg Garrison.
Greg Garrison taught me how to read music.
Wow. So what years were you at CU Denver?
Oh, I had a weird college trajectory where I went to Front Range here, and then once I had my general studies, I went to CU Denver for music. So it's just it gets foggy in the brain what the years actually were. But I mean, I graduated high school in 2010, so sometime between then and now is when that happened.
Well, I'm wondering if we overlapped. I graduated high school at Holy Family in Broomfield in 2009, and then graduated CU Denver uh, in 2013, and I had Greg Garrison as a teacher as well. So we briefly overlapped. I don't know.
I think we may just have missed each other because I think the yeah, I think I might have been doing the general studies here in Longmont for a couple of years before I went to CU Denver. So you might have just missed me, or I just missed you.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's how it goes. I'm glad we're meeting now. So we'll jump into this record here in a few minutes, but I want to talk about also this record label that you're a co-founder of called Needlejuice, and it's an indie record label. Talk about that a little bit. How did that get started? When did that get started?
Needle Juice is a collaboration between me and my pal Jace McLean, who's out in Nashville, where the company is based, and our mutual friend Brandon Brown. All of us hive mind came together to create this thing in 2017. Uh, Brandon had been saying for several years that me and Jace should start a record label, and I guess it finally sunk in at some point, or in 2017, when we both in like the same week independently decided that there were these two records that we wanted to put out that no one was putting out, no one would ever put out, and we needed to coalesce to put them out. And
who were those records?
Well, my I'm trying to find a phrase other than "come to Jesus" moment, but
we know what you mean.
the dawning moment for me, the record that made me think we need to do this, is an album called "Goodbye My 4-Track" by an artist called Logan Whitehurst, which is
cool.
is not like the most known record, but it's this very eclectic, bouncy, fun record from 2003 that meant a lot to me as a kid. And, it was coming up on 20 years that the record had been out, and no one was going to put that record out on vinyl, and I wanted it on vinyl. So I contacted Jace, and he independently had the idea that he wanted to see Lemon Demon's album Spirit Phone on vinyl. And we made both of those things happen.
Wow. Okay. So now, is this somebody that you knew prior to reaching out, or you were just a fan of the album?
Did I know Logan Whitehurst or Jace?
Right. Yeah. Did you know Logan?
No. Well, Logan put this album out in 2003, and he very unfortunately died of cancer not long after that. So I never got to know Logan, but I probably would have gotten to know him because we ran in the same circles. But Jace and me and Logan were a part of this community based around the Dr. Demento show. So it's part of that community that we would have all known each other. But no, I didn't get to know Logan, unfortunately.
Wow. But I bet he thinks that's pretty neat if he could know that his legacy carried on and you put it out on vinyl. And so now you're starting a record label, and I think when people start record labels, there's different things in mind. For you had these two specific records that you wanted to put out on vinyl. So what does a record label mean to you when you started it? Was it specifically for vinyl releases?
I think I could speak for Jace also when I say, as far as where we were concerned, if we got these two records on vinyl, that's the zenith of the achievements we could make with the label. And that was like the only goal. And we never pictured that we'd be here all these years later, and certainly didn't think we'd be paying our bills with the record label. So the fact that stuff has happened is just like astronomically beyond anything we thought would happen.
Wow. So when you first started this and you said, we're going to put these two records out on vinyl that we love, how did you go about doing that?
Well, for Logan, we got in touch with his family, and they were up for it, and it just took a while of compiling the dormant assets of this pretty old album to put it together. And Jace had he was a longtime fan of Neil Cicierega, who's the guy behind Lemon Demon, so he had that in with him. And Neil has a rabid fan base, so that probably more so than the Logan record is what helped kickstart the label into where it is now.
How did you get the funding to put out the records, and how many vinyls did you press of each one?
Well, so I guess an important, if we're going to discuss the start of the label, it's very worth mentioning that we actually started with a album by King Gizzard called Polygondwanaland, because the reason we thought to even do this was those two records, but it was taking a while to assemble these assets to actually make those things happen. But in the meantime, we had the website already, and King Gizzard in, I think it was 2017, released 5 albums that year, as they are wont to do. And one of those records, Polygondwanaland, they released. When you are releasing 5 albums in a year, you can afford to put one out as a public domain. And they
Yeah.
decided to do that with that record.
Yeah.
And because we already had the website in place, we thought, we love King Gizzard, why don't we do this? And I guess as a sort of launch scheme, we put that album out at cost for $10. So we weren't making any money off it. We just wanted to get the label name out there. And the King Gizzard fans appreciated that, and I think it resulted in some goodwill for us that helps when we put out those 2 records later on.
And how many King Gizzard records did you get pressed?
Oh, I don't know. It's been so many years that, I mean, since we were probably so new to the process, we probably did like the minimum of a vinyl run with our pressing plant, which I think is like 250. And maybe that was the initial run, and then it did turn out to be quite successful because King Gizzard fans are just like rabid for their records. So we probably did bump it up as it went along, but I think the initial goal was 250, and we ended up making more probably.
Wow. So now you're able to put out these records you want to put out, and actually, let me ask you this first. When you said King Gizzard put out this record that you pressed as public domain, what do you mean by that? That it was just put out immediately without a copyright restriction?
Yeah, they put up the art assets, their own vinyl master, and said, do whatever you want with this.
Oh my gosh. I've not heard of a band doing that. Now, they have a huge fan base who's very, very into their stuff, as you were saying. And I know I haven't delved a ton into their catalog, but I have some friends that are very, very into them. And it is like a cult following sort of situation. So that's really neat that they did that, and then some fans ran with it.
If you go to the Discogs page for Polygondwanaland, there are upwards of 200 separate releases for it. It's the album that launched 1,000 ships.
Wow.
And they've gone on.
So a bunch of people did this.
Yes, and that was the first of it, but they've gone on to launch this entire bootlegger program, and I don't even know what they're up to now, but pretty much at least for this last tour they did, literally every show has been professionally recorded and put up for labels to do whatever they want with. And over the years, we've become, I don't think I'm flattering myself to say that Needlejuice has become one of the premier indie labels doing those bootlegs.
So you've put out a whole bunch of records since then. Do you have any idea how many?
I couldn't tell you the exact number, but I know that we are coming up on, if not surpass, the catalog number for 200. So it's well over 100.
And how do you press vinyl? Is that do you have a specific plant that you work with, or what is that process like?
We have a plant called Pirates Press in California, who themselves it's kind of like the middleman for this place called GZ in the Czech Republic, and they just, we had several records by this pressing plant in our personal collections, and it's just very high quality, and we don't really ever get complaints about the quality of our records because we've just always worked with them.
So when you decide to press a record, is it usually an artist approaching you, or now that you've been around for a while, or do you still approach artists and say, hey, we want to put this record out?
I think me and Jace have discussed how like a superpower we have is the lack of or the humility it takes to just cold call somebody and ask. I guess people just don't have the temerity to ask sometimes, and so we've gotten some of our bigger titles by just emailing and asking for them. And then some of it's word of mouth and association. Like one of our bigger artists right now is a band called Tally Hall, and I think we hooked up with them because of people just they have a similar crossover between Lemon Demon and them. And we do get a lot of submissions. Like my day job is answering the emails that we get, and I get emails every couple days from somebody who wants to be on the label, but I don't know if we've ever really signed somebody through that. So it is usually through us contacting somebody.
And now, how does that work? Say you contact me and you say, Andy, we want to put out your new record. How would that work for me as the artist, from a royalty standpoint, from a funding standpoint? What would happen?
Well, I guess it depends on what the fan base situation is, and the way we used to do it. We don't really do this so much anymore, but when we were first starting out, we'd just put up an open pre-order and fund it through that. And then just hope that it worked out eventually. So, I don't think it's a surprise to say there's a lot of risk involved when you're pressing something as extravagant as a vinyl record.
Well, and do you have to get to a certain point on the pre-order before you say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and press this? Or do you just decide we're going to do it and set up a pre-order and promote and hope for the best?
The second. We've never canceled something that we committed to doing. So that just seems kind of gross, and you'd get a bad reputation pretty quick.
Well, but yeah, no, for sure, that's great. But also I can understand from a practicality standpoint if you're like, so I'm sure there's been a couple duds, right, where you thought something was going to happen and maybe didn't go as expected, and maybe a couple that went way better than expected.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speak to something that's quote unquote a dud, but there's certainly records that have done better and some that haven't, based on our expectations.
And as a record label, you said you do a lot of day-to-day stuff. Is it putting out vinyl records is a big part of it? Is there other services you guys do for the artists?
Well, vinyl is a big part of the that's what we started with, and that's kind of our big format. But we also do CDs and tapes and 8-tracks and a few wax cylinders. So different.
Wow.
It's literally in this drawer next to me. I have a wax cylinder.
Oh yeah, show and tell. Wow.
Which one is this? This is our wax cylinder of Tom Lehrer's The Elements.
Cool. That's so neat. Wow.
I had to buy a 100-year-old Edison Amberola player to make sure the people who were making those for us weren't just sending us scrolls of wax that did nothing.
Yeah, they could have just been like, well, we're just gonna send scrolls of wax and see what happens. No one has one of these. No, that's really, really cool. That's a really neat merch item, and this is a good time to tell our listeners, if you want to see what that looks like, we're not just on streaming platforms, we're also on YouTube, where you can see our faces and yeah, and maybe see my dogs running around in the background. But anyway, one other thing I know, because I was looking at some of these records, and you guys have a nice website up. Billy Cobb is on there, and then I saw Friday Night Funkin',
Yes.
which is a video game that was funded by Kickstarter, and it's sort of a cult following video game with music that was written for the game, and it's played on the computer. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is it fair to say, I was just watching some YouTube videos. I haven't played it, but in preparation for the interview, I was watching some YouTube videos. It's maybe like a Dance Dance Revolution, but for your fingers.
Yeah, it's a rhythm game that you play on the internet.
Wow. And there's, I mean, you can watch people play the game, and they have tons and tons and tons of views. And so you guys have done some stuff with the video game. That seems like a completely different world and a niche thing, which you guys have done a lot of, right? Just taking stuff you want to do and pressing it, doing stuff. How did this connection happen with a video game? Who had that idea?
That was I think Brandon made all that happen. I'm not sure if he approached them or they approached him. But the one thing I do know is that they ended up going with us because they're fans of Logan Whitehurst, which was surprising to me that anyone had heard of him. So I like to take very partial credit for the connection we have with them.
Yeah, well, all these, I feel like it's happening more and more in the music industry. These communities are sprouting up, and you don't even realize, you think it's just you and your music, but there's other people that are listening to that same thing, that are obsessed with the same records. And it's a really cool thing, and you've obviously found your community of people that love what you love, and you've found a way to do something for all of them and make a living off of it to boot.
Yes, it's never not surreal to step back and realize that we're doing that.
Is it a full-time living for you, or do you do other things to supplement as well? I mean, and I know you're also an artist.
Yeah, well, there's not much money in that particular element of my life, but yeah, I do it full time. Jace does it full time. Brandon has another gig, but he supplements with the label.
So in the last funding question I wanted to ask, or financial question, is if you press a record for somebody, how does splits work? Are the artists getting a percentage of the record sales from $1, or do you guys have to recoup everything first before they start getting paid out?
Yeah, recoup is a big part of it. Once it's been recouped, then the percentage split starts, and it's different depending on who the artist is, and it's just different depending on the audience.
Sure,
and
sure.
what's negotiated.
And people can buy records directly from your website, correct? And I assume also that the artists, you give them some that they're able to sell as well at shows and stuff?
Yeah, well, that's a part of the contract, is they get a certain number, and then they can buy at cost from us if they want more than the amount that is given in the contract, if they want to sell them at shows.
And what have some challenges been? Obviously, there's no one format that works for every artist. But what have been some challenges that have come up during the life of this label?
Oh, I feel like we've had a million missteps, and we are just constantly learning and making mistakes. And the fact that we're still around, even though it seems like we should have died from 1,000 cuts here and there, is it's hard to even like pick one to point to. But like, yeah, just constant learning.
And where do you see the label headed? What's next for Needlejuice?
Well, I guess my great hope is that we just continue what we've done, which to me is putting out music that we love to people who are receptive to it, and being able to foster growth of listeners to that music that might not have heard it otherwise.
Now, you also have a record that just came out on February 14th, also on Needlejuice Records.
Yeah.
It's called Backstage, Valentine's Release. I loved the cover because it seems like maybe it's an ode to a certain Nirvana album. Am I onto something with that?
I can't say that was intentional. So here, it happened literally today. An hour before I got on this call, I got the vinyl in.
That's why we scheduled it for today.
I don't know how well I can see some glare there, but I mean, so it's a baby with an umbilical cord that goes into a microphone. So it's this Cronenberg type idea I had, this body horror image. And I found this artist that I thought could do it really well. Her name is Igzel. I'm not sure where she's from, somewhere that is not America, but I emailed her and loved her samples that I saw online. So I got her to do this. And
how did you find her?
I think I just like scoured the internet for people who did surreal art, just looking for surreal artists who took commissions. And I among the handful that I really loved, I went with her. And so she drew this, and she chose to put it in this like liminal space with a blue background, which inadvertently made it look like the Nevermind cover, which is not super intentional, but like I can obviously see what people see that, and or see that people see that, and I mean it is what it is, and I think it at worst it's just like someone accidentally listens to the album thinking it's Nevermind.
Yeah, at worst. Yeah, but you don't sound like Nirvana. It's actually I would say, I think the word eclectic probably gets thrown around too much in our industry, but I would say that's a correct use of the word here. It is very eclectic. There's a lot of different genres. I heard elements of ska music and, punk and singer-songwriter, and there's a lot of great piano on the record too. So how do you describe yourself?
I think eclectic is as good a term as any, because it is very difficult to describe what this music is when the whole point of it is for every song to have its own distinct sound and genre.
Yeah, well, and I noticed that listening through it too. There's Baby Goes Back as a reference to Baby Got Back, and the music is, I would almost say, a traditional jazz styling. Like a New Orleans jazz sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's horns. Ode to Procreation starts off with a voice describing the baby making process. Some would say in excruciating detail. Others would say just very matter of fact. But yeah, each song just does kind of have his own personality. And you said this was 8 years in the making, correct?
Yeah. 2017
now,
is when I started.
Now, is that something you've been doing gradually over the last 8 years, or did you get started and put it down? How's the process worked?
Well, we've been marketing this album under the description of this album taking 8 years, but if you want to know the little secret, I've been working on like 12 albums interchangeably over those 8 years. And so just, like passing the hot potato, this one always was supposed to be the first one, but I think probably the reason it took that long is because I've been working on so much else that hasn't come out yet in the interim.
Mm. What made you decide to put these songs on this record? And if there's like 12 records, how are all the concepts slightly different? How do you decide what goes where?
Well, before this incarnation of what I do, I've released records in the past, but this is the first time under the band name the Odd Ditties, because I felt like I was entering some new phase of what I don't know if you want to pretentiously say, like, the artistic direction of what I do felt like it was starting something new, and that's why I have this new band name. But I felt like those old records I made didn't have a concept, and it was just the traditional, here's a group of songs we happen to make in this period of time. And I felt like, especially with the streaming age where people focus on singles, or they don't really, the album is less and less important. I felt like, for me personally, if I was going to put out an album, the songs needed to have a reason to be together. And so that's why I've just devised all these concept albums. And the reason these ones, and why this came out first, is this is the first in what's planned to be a trilogy of records that all really feel like one record to me. It just was taking so long to make it that we just decided to put this first one out as part one of the three. And it's just these three records are attempting to describe the narrative of a life, and this first album is the childhood part of that life.
And then the rest of the trilogy is growing up and adulthood and kind of thing, just progression of life.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it autobiographical, but there are autobiographical elements in it. So it is probably the most personal of these albums I'm working on. So that felt like it was important to have those come out first, as opposed to choosing any of the other records I'm working on to come out first.
Now, there's a lot of production on this record. What's your process? Do you record at home? Do you go into a studio? And were you hiring a bunch of musicians to play with you when you recorded?
All of the above. The basic tracks are all done at home. I go to a studio in Denver to record drums because I'm very ill-equipped to do that here.
Where do you go?
Being a Denver-based podcast, you are probably familiar with the band Eldrin?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite local band is Eldrin, and I record the drums and have Tyler of Eldrin mix this album too.
Cool. And I noticed you guys have done, Needlejuice has done some work with Eldrin as well.
Yeah, we put out their last record, and that was a big risk for us, but I mean our audience seems to really love that record.
Circling, when you said our audience, have you at this point developed what you feel like is your own audience for the record label, who will, for instance, you just put out this record on the label. Are there people that are fans of the record label that are like, yeah, I haven't heard of, this is the first Odd Ditties thing I've heard of, but I'm going to go get this record because Needlejuice puts out stuff that I like, so I'll probably like this too?
Yeah, that's I'm proud to say that is the case. We have our own dedicated audience. We have a Discord for the label where I think we have like upwards of 5,000 members that are just fans of the label on there.
Cool. Cool. That's awesome. That you built the community one record at a time, and it's an amazing opportunity for artists to get to have their record on vinyl as well. Do you play live? Will this record be performed out and about?
Well, I'm in between situations where that was possible at the moment. I have been planning to move down to Nashville for quite a few years to be closer to the label and help out with the shipping day to day, but it keeps not happening for various reasons. But my drummer and some other people have played these songs in Denver before. It's been a little bit since we did that, and because of that uncertainty of where I'm actually going to be living, I haven't really booked anything. So I can't say for sure, but at some point in the future, I would love to be able to play these things. It's fun to play these theatrical songs in a live setting.
Well, I was thinking it'd be really cool to see this live, and you could have a pretty large band too, to do all the parts, and it'd be a cool thing. Let me know when it is, because I'm back and forth between Nashville and Denver a lot. So if I'm in town, I'll come check it out.
The times we've performed these songs, I think we just did the whole album back to front, and it was certainly very stripped down from what you hear on the album.
Well, you got to do that sometimes. I have that experience too, where got a song with like 24 harmonies, and that's hard to, in a trumpet, and that's hard to take on the road.
Right. Of course.
Is there anything else that you wanted to say about the new record or about the record label that we haven't covered yet?
We have a handful of music videos for the record that we put out over the last couple weeks.
Cool.
And there's a video for the title track, Backstage, that is something I'm really proud of. We filmed it in Denver in various locations. The plot of the video is that starting from the caveman drum circle era to Instagram live streams, travel through the history of music. And
wow,
I wanted to achieve some level of like highbrow cinema in a music video form, and I feel like, to my satisfaction, we achieved that.
That's great. You know what? I guess I haven't seen that yet. I'll check that out as soon as we're done here. And there's a link to that in the show notes if you're watching this or listening to it. However you're taking in this podcast and the interview, check out the show notes, and there's music video links, and there's links to the Odd Ditties new record, Backstage, and there's a link to Needlejuice, the record label, as well. So go check it out. Go check out the links. And if you don't mind, Austin, stay on the line with me for just a moment. But for our audience, this is Austin Ash Lemon. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
That was my conversation with Austin Ash Lemon of Needlejuice Records and the Odd Ditties. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe wherever you listen, whether you're watching on YouTube. That's another thing we're doing with Riverside FM, is all these episodes you can watch on YouTube. But if you're not watching on YouTube, maybe you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or somewhere else. We're everywhere. And if you like the episode, hit subscribe, write a review. It helps out a lot. If you would like to support in a monetary way, I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/Andy Sido, SYDOW. Thanks again for listening, and we'll chat with you next time.